What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a showcase of sorts of my Polish bootleg Boba Fetts. I had a number of requests from subscribers to take a closer look at my Polish bootlegs, and I've got a pretty decent collection of Boba Fett Polish bootlegs, everything from unarticulated to articulated, and I thought we would take a closer look at them as well as do a quick reference to the second edition of the Polish bootleg book, the Bible, so to speak, by Jacob Brzezinski. It's a great resource for those of you who like these Polish bootlegs, and I've got a couple of really nice examples here to show you. Before I begin any further, I want to make sure to say thank you to my two latest Patreon supporters, Tori Verdell and Man or Machine. They are the latest to join my Patreon ranks. Thank you guys so much for joining up with my Patreon team. And for those of you interested in becoming a Patreon member, it's patreon.com/actionfiguregrader. I thought first we would take a look at these unarticulated Polish bootleg Boba Fetts. These are four that I have, all different colors, but all of these are the more of the common colors. But stay tuned, because I'm going to pull out the book here in 1 second and show you some of the really hot other colors that were made with these. These do not have any articulation, so the arms and the legs do not move. These are from the second set, according to Jacob Brzezinski's guide. There was a first set of unarticulated bootlegs that came out slightly earlier, kind of 1984-ish, and this second set came out starting in about 1986 all the way until about 1990. So very late to the game. And for those of you who are unaware or not familiar with these were all made in Poland during the Cold War in the 1980s and into the 1990s with the third generation, which we're going to go over here a little bit later on. And essentially, Poland did not have access to the licensed Kenner figures. So they were one of the countries that produced figures for Polish children, or collectors, I guess, in the 1980s and 1990s, since they did not have access to it because of the Cold War. So politics played a major role in the lack of availability of the licensed figures. So the first one I'm going to show you is this one. This is an unarticulated example with kind of a dark green color palette to the rubber. All of these are made with like a hard plastic rubber. Maybe not hard, but it's not very bendable. And given that the arms and legs don't move, the kids in Poland had to kind of use their imagination, so to speak. But this one has silver paint accents for the armor as well as for the visor. And let's see if we can get a nice close-up. There we go. You can see it's very crudely manufactured. It's lots of cracks and things like that in the rubber. Some wear around the chest armor there. But nice dark green color. This is graded 70, and it almost doesn't matter what the grades are for these. It's just about collecting some of these. And as we talked about in the Hakes special action figure event auction that just happened, one of these Polish bootlegs that I have in my collection did sell. So I'll show you that here in a little bit. But the next one up is like a dark brown color, and it's got green, very faint, what's left of it, green paint for the visor and for the armor. So you can see that one there. This one's graded 70 plus, which I don't know how this one got a 70 when this one got a 70 plus. This one's in much better condition, but it is what it is. It just depends on the day and the grader, I guess. But this one is a dark blue rubber with gold accents, and this particular shade of blue is not in the book, so I don't know if it's rare or not. I tend to think it's not. Most of these dark colors are not particularly hard to find. The price point on these can vary, anywhere from, I'd say, on the low end, maybe $300 up to maybe $500 for the unarticulated. It goes up from there depending on articulation and which generation it is. Blue and gold, this one's graded 70. And then the final one before we start showing you some of the other really hot ones in my collection, this is like another green color. It's a little bit more green than this kind of color. It's less olive green and more kind of forest green, I guess, if that's the right term. But this one also has gold, which is not much left of that. This one was graded 65. So these four are in my collection, and I cannot remember where I got these. I think 3 of them came from a model trim collector named Patsy. He's pretty well known in the bootleg group. but I did pick up one other one, and I can't remember where I got it. So before we dig into some of the others in my collection, I wanted to really quickly show you some photos from the book. This is Far, Far Away, A Guide to Unlicensed Polish Figures, and this is the second generation book. This was written by Jacob Brzezinski, and I was one of the Kickstarter backers for this book. And here are a few other examples. There's a really nice sky blue, a very rare color. This is the pink. According to the book, there are about 140 total examples left of this unarticulated Polish bootleg Boba Fett for this second set. And there was not a first set version that was unarticulated, but Elektrospolzelnia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That's, I guess, one of the other factories, and I didn't look up what the name of the factory was that produced these. You'll have to bear with me and see if I can find that information really quickly. Unknown producer. So they don't know who the factory was or the company name was that produced this second set, but Elektrospolzelnia was one of the articulated bootlegs. And oftentimes what they did, some of these secondary factories, they would just take those and then create straight copies. And that's why a lot of the second set, especially bootlegs, are so small. They're a lot smaller since they basically took the articulated version and made a mold out of it. So they're much more crude than some of the other examples. But here's a few other really awesome colors. A buddy of mine has a really large collection of these, and it's pretty cool to see them all lined up. Here's kind of the other blue colors. This is blue, dark blue with gold chest, and here's another one with a gold chest and a silver chest. And you can see how much lighter that blue is than mine. Mine's kind of a much darker blue color, but these, usually the more wacky the colors, the more desirable they are. And here's some of the more common colors, gray and black. The red is another nice one. I've seen a few of those sell over the years. And some green shades there for you. Brown and dark brown. So I've got a few of the more common ones, as you can see here. But usually the brighter the color, the more desirable and the much more pricey these these second set unarticulated Boba Fetts can be, but none of them are very cheap these days. Here is probably the best Polish bootleg Boba Fett in my collection. This is what I call a first generation articulated example, along with a first generation blaster. They also produce their own weapons over there, and this is displayed in front of an overstock card back. So very, very nice example, and I kind of assembled this over the course of about a year and a half across 3 different purchases. But this is what the card backs look like. And according to the book, there are a set of about 20 of these. And the producer is Elektrospolzelnia. So these are the types of figures that they use to make the smaller unarticulated bootlegs that I just showed you. But this is a really early example of these Elektrospolzelnia figures, and the years of production were from 1985 to 2003 across 3 different generations. So this is the first generation version. And as I said, this is an unused card back for how they were sold in stores. Usually they were kind of in a baggie or maybe a blister for the later versions that were stapled to the card backs. There are a lot of fake overstock card backs out there, so you got to be very, very careful. Usually you can tell because these 3 stars that I'm circling right here in the upper portion of this explosion are not there. If you see a card back for sale that's advertised as an overstock card back and it doesn't have those little 3 stars there, that's a pretty good sign it's a fake. But I did pick this up from a pretty trusted collector. There are also some printer error examples where when they were printing these card backs, a white slash appears on this side, over in this side, and so the factory would just discard them and redo it, since they viewed those as kind of printing errors. And so you can find those as well, and those would be considered overstock card backs as well. And it's just a really cool example that I kind of assembled over time, and I wanted to show you really quickly a few examples. So it looks like these were actually blisters, not not baggies. I know that a lot of the weapons were sold in baggies, just big bunches of them, but these actually had blisters that were attached to the card back, and here's a number of different examples from the book. Very, very cool to see these. This is a 3rd generation Boba Fett with a darker gray paint scheme. Usually the more crude the paint, the earlier the example is, but given that there are so many different generations of these and they produce them for such a long time, that you're just gonna have to do your research and take a look at the figure. And the arm sockets are a dead giveaway. Usually they have like a cone shape to the arm sockets for the 1st generation, and then later generations they use the round sockets that we kind of know and love from the Kenner figures. But just wanted to show you some of the different examples of the card backs that were used out there, and pretty cool to see all of these figures mint on card. One of the admins for the Bootleg group on Facebook, he's got the entire set mint on card, which is just an incredible accomplishment and nothing I could afford. So this kind of gives the appearance of a mint on card item, even though these figures were not included. You know, the weapons were not included with the figures originally. But I just thought it'd be kind of a cool display piece. And this one is graded 80. It's a 1st generation with a 1st generation blaster, Boba Fett, articulated, displayed with the card back. So usually, you know, these can go for a pretty penny these days, and you know, the 1st generation early Boba Fett's, and even the 3rd generations, which I'm going to show you here very shortly, they have also creeped up quite a bit in price. But just one of my favorite items in my collection, just having an unused overstock card back with a 1st generation Boba Fett, and then a 1st generation blaster to kind of display next to it. It's kind of in a darker blue color, but very, very cool item. Next up, we've got a 3rd generation. So this is one of the later iterations from that factory, and this has the dark gray, and this is labeled as the dark green chest plate. It doesn't look that dark, but the one, there's another 3rd generation, which I'll show you from the book here in a second, assuming it's in here. It's got an even very light lime green kind of paint scheme to the armor and the belt. But this is the 1st Boba Fett I picked up quite a while ago, and this one is graded 85 by Collector Archive Services. You can just see how clean the paint is. The arms and the legs are the Biker Scout limbs, and that's true for a vast majority of these articulated figures, is that they reused the Biker Scout arms and limbs or the TIE Fighter pilot's arms and limbs across all of the different characters. But a very, very nice, clean example. And, you know, at the time I overpaid for it. I paid way too much for it, but it has since skyrocketed well past those prices. I think for an 85 grade, you know, we've documented a few in the market updates where these have sold on eBay at auction, and the going rate right now is about $700 for a 3rd generation one, which it seems crazy to me, but that's kind of what the price is. And from the book, I wanted to quickly show you some of the other Boba Fetts that are out there. Here's a 1st generation example with gray hard rubber with a darker green chest plate. This is the one that I have displayed in front of that overstock card bag. This is the 1st generation gray with kind of an aquamarine chest plate. So that's kind of more in keeping with the example that I have. But there are a number of different colors, and some of the best ones, in my opinion, are the 2nd generation ones. Here's a few other 1st generation examples that are extremely clean. Much cleaner than most 1st generation. This one's got kind of a lime green color, blue armor. This one doesn't even have the stomach armor painted. Here's one with yellow paint. Here's a few other examples that are 1st generation. This one right here is a 1st generation with a kind of a darker gray color. Another, let's see, that one looks like that's another 1st generation. Here is a later generation unused. This has got unused limbs, but they attach those limbs to to a torso that's been painted. So this is kind of a mishmash of overstock parts, along with a body that's gone through the production process. My favorite one is probably this one. This is kind of a 2nd generation, is what they call it. These kind of came out in 1991-ish. They're not 1st generation, kind of cruder paint, and they're not nearly as clean as the 3rd generation that's in my collection, but that's probably the coolest color scheme, since that kind of closely mimics the license figure. But Here's another example that really closely mimics the licensed figure with very, very close approximations of the Kenner Boba Fett. So that's got to be worth quite a bit of money, even though it's from the 1990s. Here's another really cool one with a purple rocket pack and some pink accents, just crazy color combinations. And that's kind of what's great about these Polish bootlegs, is that it's almost like an infinite collectability. You can really pick up some nice color combinations and build up a cool collection. I wanted to also show you a late generation unpainted overstock example. This is one where it's not on the factory sprue anymore. And then here is the actual mold by Elektrospolzenia, where the metal mold pieces were used for creating this piece right here. So these are in collectors' hands. I've seen a few of them for sale over the years, and they go for big money, $10,000 plus. But just really cool to see the manufacturing process and the fact that some of these collectors had the foresight to save them before they're lost to time. It's just really cool to see that. So finally, I wanted to show you another third generation that we just covered in the Hakes video, and that's this one here. This is a true overstock piece with the unpainted torso on the left hand side, and then the arms and legs are still on the factory sprue. So very tough. I picked this up from a gentleman named Gilly in Spain, and he sent it to me, and they arrived safe and sound. And then I sent it to Collector Archive Services for preserving. These arms and legs are very delicate and can fall off the sprue very easily. So I didn't want to take any risks, and I had them add a lot of brackets and kind of platforms to support everything to prevent this falling off the sprue. But as you guys remember, one of these did sell in the Hakes auction that was displayed with some stickers for Elektrospolzenia. And I don't know whether the stickers are actual, correct items to be displayed with this piece. I've heard from a few collectors that say that it's not legit, or they question it's the validity of those stickers. But this item was a UKG 85 grade in the Hakes special Star Wars auction event, and it sold for big money. I think it was $4,600. But this one obviously does not have the stickers. It's just the overstock pieces, and it is graded 90 by Collector Archive Services. So very cool item. I do really like these overstock pieces, but they've just gotten so expensive that it's really difficult for me to acquire them anymore, because everyone wants to get some of these overstock unpainted, unassembled figures. They just it's just kind of a cool pre-production item from the this is probably the late 1990s or mid 1990s, when the third generation figures were kind of nearing the end of the heyday, and that's why these still exist, is that the factories were kind of closing up and they just never finished them. So but it's kind of cool to show you guys what the figure looked like, or similar, what it looked like after it was assembled and painted by the factory workers versus the unpainted example. The rubber, the gray rubber, is not exact. These are two different colors. This is kind of a lighter gray versus the darker gray for this one, but there is a lighter gray version of the third generation articulated Boba Fett with a slightly different paint scheme that still has the gold and the black, but just a slightly different color to the armor, and then the visor is usually painted black instead of gold on that example that uses this type of lighter gray rubber. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of show these off since a few folks have been asking about them. I hope you enjoyed looking at them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.